This series of video lessons is on polynomials and factoring, and there are some previous skills that we've learned that are going to be really important in this chapter. That's why I would like you to work on these problems. You can just do 1 through 31, and you can just do the odds, and go ahead and work with a partner if you want to, or work alone, but I would like you to turn them in when you're done. This beginning section is quite vocabulary intensive because this is just the way we communicate with math. So here are 4 terms that you're going to need to know what they mean when it comes to math. But you kind of should have an idea already. So let's start with example number 1. The word is monomial. And mono, hopefully you know in real life already means the word 1. And so when we translate that to math, what we really mean is a one-termed expression. Nomial means term. So mono is 1, nomial is term. An example of that might look like 2x. Binomial, think of bicycle, and bi means 2, and so in math it means a two-termed expression. And that may look like 2x plus 3. I'll just write right over it. A trinomial means, like tricycle, that means 3. And so as before, this one would be a 3-term expression. And I'll write this one underneath it here. It might be something like 2x squared plus 2x plus 1. 3 terms. 1, 2, 3. And polynomial is just something that we call any expression that's over 3 terms. And poly means many. And so many terms. And an example of that just might be 2x to the 4th plus 3x cubed, let's say, plus 1x squared plus 4. Many terms. So in these 4 problems below, we're going to practice the names of each expression based on its number of terms. Looking at example number 1, I like to call terms, again as a review, the chunks between the plus signs. And remember, this minus sign here could really be thought of as plus and negative 2x. So you really do have all plus signs. And so how many chunks do we have? We have 3 of them, and so this would be a trinomial. Number 2 is just sitting all by itself. It has no plus sign, so it's just one term. Monomial. Here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 chunks between plus signs, so we will call that a polynomial, many terms. And then here we have 2 terms, so this is a binomial. There's another way to classify polynomials, and that is by its degree. So here you can see that we need to define what the degree of a polynomial is. And the degree of a polynomial is the highest power that you see in the polynomial. Alright, well, let's look at these 3 examples and determine what the highest power is. So I'm starting off by looking at this one here. I have 4x to the 5th plus 2x plus 3. And so my powers or exponents are 5, and here's a 1, and this doesn't have 1. And so my highest power is the power of 5, and so we would call this a degree 5 polynomial. The next one is a monomial, and its highest power is just 1, and so this is a degree 1 polynomial. And then we have a binomial here, and this power here is a 1, and this one is a 3, and so this is a degree 3 polynomial. This brings us to another vocabulary idea that's very important, and that is the idea of standard form. Standard form is a way that we write our polynomials. And standard form just means that we have written the degrees or the powers in decreasing numbers from left to right. So take a minute to write that down. And then we will look at our next two examples and we will write them in standard form. So looking at this trinomial, which power is the highest? Well, your answer should be the x to the third power, and so we write the coefficient that's with it, the negative 5. That would become first, so negative 5x cubed. Well, descending order, which would mean that this x squared term comes next, and that has a positive coefficient of 2 there, and so we would write 2x squared next. And then last we have the x to the first power. So negative 4x would come next. And again, look at how your powers decrease from 3, 2 to 1. Next example, we have a situation here where we need to actually combine these because they have the same power. And so I can combine my 3x to the fourth and my 5x to the fourth, and that would become an 8x to the fourth. But the way I'm writing it here is still not standard form. The 8x to the fourth would come first, so I'll write that down. And then I don't have an x cubed, so I just skip on down to the 2x squared power, and then the minus 4, which just really, when you think about it deeply, has an exponent of 0 there. That's why you don't see a variable. I'd like to point out one little piece of vocabulary that you may start to hear more and more, and that is the idea of a leading coefficient. So when you have written your polynomial in standard form, that is from highest to lowest power, we call the first number before the variable the leading coefficient. So in example 1, negative 5 is my leading coefficient, and example number 2, the 8 is your leading coefficient. Again, that has to take place when you are in standard form. Alright, well, we're going to do some guided practice. I'll do the first one with you, and then you guys can do the last 3. So looking at polynomial number 1, the question is, what is the degree? Remember, that is the highest power that you see in the polynomial, and that would be a 3. The next question is, how many terms do you have? And we're going to name it. So we have 3 terms, and we know that's called a trinomial. And then if we're to write it in standard form, our highest power needs to come first. So that would be negative 2x cubed. Then x squared would be the next lower exponent. And then plus 3x would be last. And if we were asked, the leading coefficient would be a negative 2. So that's what we're expecting out of this guided practice. Go ahead and pause the video and come back when you're done. And here are those answers. So take a minute to look at them. And then again, I'd just like to point out the leading coefficients of them all. This would be a 7, this would be a 1, and this would be a 2. So here's a little table I thought it would be good for you to fill out. So I will fill in the first column with the polynomials you will be looking at. And then I would like you to list the degree of all of them and then name them using the degree, which might be new for you, so we'll go through that together. And then the number of terms, and then you're going to use the name of the term. So looking at the first row, I have a constant. It's just the number 4. But that means we have a situation like this going on, and I'll write this down. X to the 0 power had to be there because you know x to the 0 power is 1. That's why you don't even see it. And so that is a degree 0 polynomial, really. And when we have a variable that's to the degree 0, you end up with just a constant, which is what we would call the degree using its name. How many terms does this thing have? Well, it has one term, and so we call that a monomial. Alright, so then for the next one we have 4x, and that is to the first power, so it is degree 1. And when you have anything where the highest degree is 1, we call that linear because it makes the line, and we've talked about linear functions already. In terms of the terms, we only have one term again, and so that is a monomial. Then we have 4x squared plus 2, and whenever our degree is 2, we call it a quadratic. And then the number of terms is 2, and so that's a binomial. For our next example, I want to change this up and say that our degree is 3. So I'm going to make this a 3. Then I'll make this a 4 because it's more interesting that way for our table. A degree 3 polynomial is called cubic, but it has 3 terms, and so that's a trinomial. And then here we have a 4th degree polynomial because our highest power is 4. That one's actually called quartic. And the number of terms it had was 4, and so we would use the generic polynomial. Now in terms of this table, I know there's some stuff I didn't formally go over, so I'll just tell you what I'm going to emphasize. I'm going to need you to know what a degree is when I ask you what one is, and then you should be able to see the number of terms and name them. Okay? This one I did here is something you're going to see in Algebra 2, and you might be interested to know what they're called. They do have names by their degrees, but again, the ones that I have with the arrows are the important ones that you're going to be tested on. So here I would like you to practice classifying the polynomials using that chart, and I'll just write down what exactly you're supposed to be writing down. So the first thing you're supposed to write down is its name based on its degree, and I'd like you to try that. And then its name based on its number of terms. Okay, so do that for all 5 of these. Pause the video and come back. And here are those classifications and names. For number 2 and the challenge problem, you needed to combine like terms because I did have polynomials, or sorry, terms that had the same power, so you should combine them first and then name them after the fact. Alright, thanks for watching the video. Remember, you can always watch the videos again or ask questions if you have them.